Good morning. I'm David Raab, founder and CEO of the CDP Institute, and I'm delighted to join you at MMA Impact. I'm sad I can't join you live and in person, but I'm still glad to be here. Today, we're going to talk about using data to win in a world without cookies. But before we do that, let's just talk about why data even matters. Data matters because MarTech runs on data, and marketing today is MarTech. 26% of marketing budgets are spent on technology. More than 8,000, more than actually 10, 12,000 MarTech products are available to choose from. 92% of marketers tell us that CRM and data are important to their business. 98% of marketers tell us that that personalization is important. There's simply no way that you can succeed today as a marketer without mastering MarTech. MarTech, in turn, depends on data. Data comes from consumers, and consumers want privacy. They've made that very clear. The problem is that privacy is shrinking, and this is a problem. Why is this a problem, you may ask? Well, let's talk about that, okay? Privacy is shrinking. Consumer response to that is they worry about it. 64% of global consumers tell us they're concerned about use of personal data. 71% in India, a little less in Asia and Vietnam, but still a vast majority are worried about the data. If they won't share their data with you, your MarTech machine comes to a grinding, crashing halt. The government response is to regulate. That's what governments do. The GDPR passed in 2018, or effective in 2018, the CCPA in the US, effective this year. India, Vietnam, Indonesia all have data protection bills that are in some stage of passage or being worked upon. So it's happening everywhere, including in your markets. The industry response to this concern about privacy has to be to restrict access to data. The browser manufacturers, Firefox, Safari, Chrome, have all been blocking third-party cookies or plan to block third-party cookies. The mobile device makers, Android, Apple, have been blocking access to device IDs. There are more privacy-first alternatives. If you don't want to use Chrome or Firefox, you can use DuckDuckGo. You can use Proton Mail if you don't want to use Gmail. So consumers have the choice to pick privacy-first alternatives. And of course, the walled garden days, the Facebooks and Googles and Amazons of the world, they are offering alternatives because they're blocking access to their data, like data clean rooms or trust tokens, ways for marketers to get at least some access to data without actually violating consumer privacy. The marketer response is to panic. Oh my goodness, they're taking away all my wonderful third-party cookies that have been giving me so much data that I've really built my entire ecosystem around. So we have Facebook actually threatening to shut down their audience network when Apple proposed consent language on the iOS 14 that would have made it very unlikely for consumers to grant access to their data. We have industry groups like the Partnership for Addressable Media in the US opposing privacy law, pushing for federal preemption of state laws like the CCPA, which is a state law, because they assume the federal laws will be a little more lax. And we have things like the World Federation of Advertisers, which is an industry group that covers everyone, advertisers and technologists alike, that offer standard for measurement alternatives, again, not using personal data, and honestly, nowhere near as good as what we're used to. So it's no wonder everyone is panicking, but let's calm down, okay? Here's a nice little cute puppy. Look how calm this puppy is. Just sort of be that puppy for a moment. Let's calm down. The world is not going to come to an end. Okay? Advertising existed before cookies. You may not remember it. Some of us do. It will exist after cookies, but not the end of the world. In fact, cookies impact just a small and shrinking share of advertising. If you really do the math, about 25% of the marketing budget is spent on media. Only half of that budget is spent on digital media. Less than half of digital media time is actually spent on the browsers where cookies matter. Less than 20% of your digital budget is actually spent outside the walled gardens. And remember, within the walled gardens, cookies are not the issue. So if you do all that math and you add it all together, less than 1% of your marketing budget is actually impacted by the loss of third-party cookies. It's just not quite as great a trauma as it sometimes feels. Marketers actually are getting better at getting consent. Okay, this is something we haven't paid much attention to, and we'll talk a little about later, but we can actually get more data from people if we do a better job of asking for it. We simply haven't focused it on it. And let's face it, marketers were struggling even with cookies. 2/3 of them told us they couldn't fully measure the ROI of their programmatic ad programs, and it's the programmatic ad programs the cookies are impacting. So we still had a hard time. We already were having a hard time. It's not that big a change. Okay. So let's imagine. Let's go ahead and just think about what does life actually look like in a world without cookies. Oh, thinking caps here. Okay. What do we lose when third-party cookies go away? Well, there are two things that are impacted. The first is your programmatic ad targeting. Okay. Because what we've been doing so far is we've been buying anonymous individuals based on their behavior. That's how that works. The cookies are tracking anonymous individuals. We may be able to later connect those cookies to real people. In fact, we often can. But at the end of the day, the cookies themselves are inherently not connected to people. So we look at their intent, we look at their behavior, we look at their demographics. Those are the things we know. And that's what we've been targeting our programmatic ads on. And then we can track those same individuals, whether they're known or anonymous, across sites and sessions. That's actually the real power of the third-party cookie, is that you can say, oh, I saw this cookie on this site, now this cookie's on that site. I begin to build a track of that cookie's history, whether or not I know who the person involved with it is. And the other big thing we do with it, we use it for advertising measurement. We can connect the ad views to the post-view behavior, whether it's site visits or purchases or whatever, so we can begin to measure the effectiveness of our ads. And again, the cookies make that possible, even if you don't know who the person is. So there is some stuff that's being lost here. We're not going to say there's nothing going on. On the other hand, there is still plenty that we can do without cookies. First of all, without cookies, we can certainly still do all the media that we were doing before. Okay, remember that half of our budget isn't even spent on web ads anyhow. It's even spent on digital. It's spent on broadcast and such. So we can still do our non-targeted advertising and broadcast and print and out of home. We can still do the targeted advertising that doesn't depend on web ads, like mobile apps, smart TV, digital out of home, streaming devices, other kinds of digital advertising that's targeted but doesn't use cookies to do the targeting. That very much alive and well and actually growing. And we can still target on our own websites where you can use first-party cookies or first-party data, whether it's the website or email or text messaging or Internet of Things devices, and increasingly deliver advertising, whatever it is we're going to do. We can still do all that, nothing to do with cookies. None of that goes away. Now, are there issues? Yeah, it's harder to target in some of these media. We don't necessarily have the audience size or coverage for things like mobile apps or smart TV that we were getting on the open web with third-party cookies. And a lot of what we want to do with third-party cookies has been people we don't know acquiring new customers, whereas a lot of these things here that we're talking about really are more aimed at retaining existing customers. Certainly the targeting of owned media only goes to people that you already have some sort of relationship with. So it's more about retention than it is about acquisition. So there are issues, of course. The second thing we'll still be able to do is we'll still be able to send our web ads to unknown audiences. And remember, cookies were anonymous too, but not cookies, we had a pretty decent profile. Here we're talking about things like, I can still send contextual advertising. I may not who's visiting this site about sports news, but I know they're interested in sports news. Or I know they're interested in cooking, or I know they're interested in whatever the topic of the website is. Similarly, I may not know who's within this particular geographic area, which could be a region that's, a city or a state, or it could also be, very specific, who's outside my store at this moment, because all my technology lets me track that and reach out to people in a very specific geo-targeting area, again, without knowing anything about them except that they're outside the door. I can target to walled gardens. I can still send the ads to the walled gardens guys, again, Facebook, Google, Amazon. They're not going to tell me who the audience is, but they know all the detail, because all the wonderful, good data that they're collecting is all first party. So they can target very, very accurately, just like we did with the third-party cookies, except of course that it is within the walled garden. Similarly, we can still do anonymized analytics. We can't necessarily track individuals, but we can find a lot of information about people at a higher level. Are there issues? Again, yeah, frequency caps is the big one. If I can't track individuals, I don't know that this particular person has been on the site 18 times today. And I don't really want to show them the same ad 18 times. If it was a cookie, I could say, this cookie's been here 3 times, cut them off. I can't do that without some tracking at the individual level. It's harder to get good deals on the impression cost and the inventory because there's less inventory on particular sites if I really want to track with just sports sites, as opposed to reaching the same people when they're on some other site. Again, as with frequency caps, if I can't track individuals, I can't control the message consistency. So if I want to send the same ad to the same person, or maybe sequence ads to the same person, I can't do that if I don't know who the person is, or if I at least don't know that it's the same person every place. And again, as I said, this does often require reliance on the third-party vendors, on the walled garden vendors, and the walled garden vendors are in it to make money for them, not really to make money for you, regardless of what they might tell you. The third option we have is we can still target our web ad using identifiers other than cookies. There are other identifiers available. Okay, we have certainly the option to target signed-in visitors. That's probably the best thing. Again, at least the publisher knows who they are. And if the publisher's willing to share that information with us, then we'll know who they are too. And we can do all the things that we would do with identifiers. There are other passive IDs, passive in the sense that the user doesn't have to consent to share that data, such as IP address, that to some extent let us track individuals across websites. IP address, not totally accurate, but it's an option in some cases. And again, there are privacy safe IDs, such as a hashed email address, where if you do have the email address, that can be shared in a privacy safe fashion by hashing it, which is simply to encrypt it so no one can read what it is, across different sites. So if that same person shows up at multiple sites where all the site owners know their email address, whether they've signed in or whether they've used first-party cookies to identify them, we can then also, as an advertiser, track that same person and recognize them across all those sites, and then do all our great frequency capping and message sequencing and all the fun things that we want to do, as well as our response measurement. Again, we run into some issues here. Again, we have issues of audience size and coverage. Most of these things require some sort of data provision, like an email address or a sign-in by a visitor. Not everyone's going to do that. Tougher to track across channels, even if we have a good web address for people that applies across multiple websites. We still have issues if we want to do things like deal with them in email or out of home or other channels where we might not have that, or even smart devices where we might not have the same identifier. And it's not clear that all of these are going to be allowed in the future. They are raising some of the same privacy issues that have caused people to restrict access to third-party cookies in the first place. So it's quite conceivable that regulators will kind of catch on and say, hey, we told you you can't track people without their consent. You found a clever way to do it, but we're not going to allow that. So again, certainly some options here. Certainly the world does not end. Maybe they're not quite as convenient as what we had with third-party cookies, but they still certainly give us ways to do business. Every one of those post-cookie options needs first-party data. This is an important point, okay? Yes, we can deal without third-party cookies, but the more we deal without third-party cookies, the more we need our first-party data, okay? And here's just a very handy little chart that's way too small for any human being to read that talks about each of those options that we talked about earlier, whether it's the non-targeted or the targeted owned or the contextual advertising, and then which kind of first-party data they rely on. Almost all of them assume we're going to be able to build profiles of individuals so we can understand who they are and target accordingly, or be able to build audiences by combining those individual profiles. And then there's things like personalization and lookalike modeling and other things, all of which rely on our first-party data. So first-party data becomes more and more important in this privacy-driven world. So, next question, how do we get better first-party data? How do we get great first-party data? Let's be ambitious here. Okay, well, there are 3 things we can do. First thing is we can get more profiles on more people, which means we have to give people more reasons to share their data. Remember, the more privacy we offer them, the more likely they are sharing. If we can build trust with better privacy practices, and by promoting our existing practices, because it's not good enough to do it, you have to actually have people believe that you're doing it, know that you're doing it, then they're going to have more trust in us. If we protect their data, and lots of surveys have told us that the most important motivator for people to share their data is that they believe you're going to treat it properly. We can also optimize our consent gathering techniques. All those little click boxes that you've had to accept cookies or not, those have been designed for the most part by lawyers. Lawyers do not really design customer interfaces very well. This is kind of the marketer's job. And we as marketers really have to step into that and take control of that and optimize that to give an experience that encourages people to consent. Doesn't trick them into consent, but encourages them in a positive way to see the advantages of consent and to sign in and give us access to their data. And the more we do that, the more data we have, the better job we'll do with their data and the more reasons they'll have to give it to us because they see the value. Second thing we can do is we can build richer profiles, okay, more data. Because we have lots of data, at least about our customers, our known customers, in all kinds of internal systems, not just in the web system itself. It's sitting there in your email system, it's sitting there in your marketing automation, in your e-commerce platform, in your retail platforms, all the stores that are gathering customer data and customer service system. We can connect all that data together to build richer profiles. Richer profiles, again, let us do better targeting, let us do a better job for our customers. They also give us more leverage to share data with other people, to exchange data in second-party data arrangements, which is where 2 companies decide to exchange their data. The more we have, the more we can negotiate with to work with other people, the better and more attractive partners we are. Similarly, we can do a better use of third-party data, which is simply data we buy. We don't have to exchange it with anyone else. And we can do actually much more than we've been doing with third-party data once we master it. And we can improve our analytics, finally, to add derived variables like predictive model scores or less fancy metrics than that, but things that indicate interest or other kind of metrics that let us do a better job of targeting based on the data that we have, and then possibly using that to build lookalike models to find other people so we can do acquisition as well as retention based on this data. And the third thing that we can do is we can actually do a better job of using the data, activating it. We can do a better job with analytics for segmentation, selecting best offers, and doing personalization messages. There's lots of things that we can do with better analytics to do a better job of dealing with our customers and, again, giving them a better experience, which will encourage them to share their data and, of course, to respond to our ads in the first place. We can orchestrate not just individual experiences, but across the experience. The same customer over time, the same customer across channels. All of our great MarTech gives us a great amount of information, a great amount of capability to do that kind of orchestration. We actually have to do a better job of doing it. Similarly, and finally, we have to integrate with our delivery systems better. Okay, this is the final mile problem. Okay, we have this great analytics, we have this great data, but if we don't use it for something, we don't actually push the messages out and have systems that can take that data and do the personalization, deliver the personalized messages, then we don't get much value. So we have to do a better job of integrating our delivery systems with our customer data. And finally, of course, we have our friend technology. Marketing today is MarTech. We have our customer data platform, it's my world, that builds those unified profiles, takes all the data from the internal systems and puts it together in one place, makes it available. Again, we have lots of tools for analytics and orchestration and personalization. Again, there's your 8,000 tools we talked about. Plenty of stuff out there. You have to learn how to use it. You don't want to buy all 8,000. We have to do a better job of privacy management. Again, of both managing privacy and explaining how we're managing privacy. Don't leave it up to the IT department. Don't leave it up to the privacy people, the compliance people. They're wonderful people. Their job is to just keep things really secure, not really necessarily to make the customers happy. And we can share, of course, that data outside of marketing, the sales, service, and operational groups, all of whom great value from, all of them have data they have that they can contribute, and it has to be an exchange even within the company. So final words here. Don't mourn the loss of cookies. Celebrate what comes next. Thank you.